Hi, everybody, and welcome. Rosann, welcome. It's a cold day in Georgia, isn't it?
It sure is. Sure is.
So
Yeah.
I'm thinking about planting by the signs and planting in the cold weather. What does that mean for us?
Ha! Well, you know, I am now at my mother's house in Macon, which is a whole different planting zone. Um, Things that I have planted in North Georgia, a little cherry tomato, literally comes down here and it's big as a Volkswagen. My
Really?
mother gave it the name Volkswagen. So it's really interesting to learn about planting in another zone. So our ground is just now starting to freeze. So for winter bulbs, by winter bulbs, I mean two kinds. I was thinking kinds that you can still plant now and
Mhm.
will come up next year. Um, and number two, the winter bulbs that you can plant on your windowsill in a
Oh,
bright
yeah.
window, so you can bring color into these dreary months. I mean, we get the what is it, the amaryllis or the little winter
That's
whites,
what I
all
was
those.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, winter whites can be a little stinky. I've had to let them go outside some of the time. Um, but yeah, and after Christmas, I always get my Christmas bulbs after Christmas because they go on sale
Sale.
then.
Yeah.
They used to not be hardly anything, but now apparently it's a thing to give Christmas bulbs. So I was really thinking that is a way that folks north of us won't be planting at all,
Yeah.
and that your time to get your bulbs in the ground for next year is gone.
That's a really good point because as we talk about Appalachia does go into New York,
Yes.
and that time up there has passed.
Yeah, and hopefully, I've been working on a spreadsheet where I can um, think about gardening techniques and what time of year it might start. If you look at what the extension agents do for Georgia, you'll see that they'll put out a planting calendar for the whole state, but they'll say North Georgia, Middle Georgia, South Georgia, because what's happening down in South Georgia, which is dang near Florida. I
Mhm.
mean, you're growing things very differently than you're growing in North Georgia. So I was trying to think about all the planting zones in Appalachia so we could start mentioning next year. Okay, if you're in this part of
That's great.
Appalachia, this is when you'll want to get your bulbs in for next year.
That
So
is fantastic
yeah,
idea. I'm loving that.
it takes a little bit of research to get there, but all of us can certainly go and grab one of those on sale bulbs,
Yes.
and or maybe we'll be lucky enough to get some in our stocking, and plant them. The other thing that I hope to do for next year is if we want bulbs by Christmas,
Mhm.
and those bulbs take 4 to 6 weeks. Some are earlier bloomers than others. Some are later bloomers. We should have been thinking about that in October to
Good
get
point.
those bulbs in the ground. So I'd love to hear from our listeners what you're interested in growing and what you
That
would
for
like.
me, yeah, bulbs are one of the easiest flowers to make happen. I
Yes.
go to a little tiny small grocery store. I'll go ahead and say it. We don't get paid by them. I go to Aldi and they usually have a bag of bulbs for $5 around this
See,
time.
I didn't know
And
that.
yeah, and they've got all different. You could get them mixed, or you can get them by type. And I always get the lilies. I love lilies. I Some people hate the smell, but the smell of lilies I'm entranced by it. Just plant them and go.
Mhm.
Just plant them
Yes.
in one way. Now, the one thing I got to get better at is the dividing. So
Yes.
that might be next year. But yeah, I agree with you. After Christmas, check out those bulbs.
The we talk about above ground crops when the moon is waxing or appearing to get bigger, and below ground crops or root crops when the moon is waning. But sometimes we forget about our flowers,
Yeah.
because you could argue for both
Hmm.
in some cases. But when I was talking with a friend of mine, he said, I think of it as the part that you not just eat, but the part that is the most vital. So in a bulb, we love the flower,
Yeah.
but it's it's that ugly looking thing that looks like a little, alien baby when you first put it in.
And I'm curious, I noticed that Chris is in the audience, and Chris does a lot of gardening, and she's a faithful viewer. So Chris, I would be curious, in your area in Ohio, have you passed the stage of planting bulbs? Are you done gardening for the year and cleaning up? Because I know up in the northern and north central parts of Appalachia have been getting quite a bit of snow. So yeah, I think she's done. Let me, Chris. So you are done with your planting this year. I'm thinking yes, in Ohio.
So for me, when I've been in North Georgia, my love, and in fact, not just my love, but what we were tasked to do with the seed project is to grow out heirloom seeds that students had collected. The elders would come and tell us stories about. Sometimes they would bring biscuits and introduce students to all kind of things. One time they brought moonshine. I said, that's not going to work. But we loved that we had a place where community members could come and students could learn. So it kind of inverts that teacher is the expert. So our job was to grow vegetable seeds. We had very few bulbs of any kind were difficult for us. We struggled with storing potatoes. We struggled with storing carrots. We tried all different ways. We did not have that storage mechanism down. So most of ours were seeds and most of ours were vegetable seeds. We had a few flower seeds, but not too many. So I am looking forward to being in a different zone with no constraints on what I can grow. And what I'm so excited about, I wish I'd taken a picture of this, is I finally got enough things cleared out so I could see what was behind my mother's house.
I know you've been working on that.
So many years ago, I can't even begin to guess. If I said 20, it's not long enough. I gave my mother an amaryllis. My mother took that amaryllis and put it in a pot. And every year it would come back later on She must have planted that in the ground behind my house, because now there is a stand of them that is so big I cannot get my arms around it.
Oh, you're gonna show us a picture next
webcast, and I'm gonna have to get some master gardener advice.
I never thought about planting them in the ground.
And I never thought they would naturalize like that.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, because my mother, no plant would go unstolen. And Mom, if you're listening, I'm right. I was with her in a national park one time, and she's trying to save an endangered species. And the ranger says, ma'am, that's a $25,000 fine per incident. And she said, well, if you leave it there, it's going to die. People are going to step on it. But I'm going to move it over here on this side of the hill where blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. And she took that after her grandmother. So,
brave woman.
I've tried not to be the plant thiever.
Yeah.
I've tried not to carry that on. So don't do like my mother and grandmother did. But so I'm interested to see what they will be. Now that they have light, they may actually do something. So that was one of my treats when I finally got everything. So I found lantana, all kind of things. And the best part, was I started cleaning out the shed. We've called it the shed. We've called it the barn. We've called it the garage. And I found my mother's seed collection.
Oh my.
And she recycled everything. Child of the Depression. They might be in an Ace bag, like Ace Hardware. They might be in a drugstore bag. They were in whatever container she could find.
Are they labeled?
No, of course not.
Oh, I can't wait to see what happens.
So I'm going to have to be doing some little trials. Now, I'm pretty They were either from flowers around this place or perhaps purloined flowers. I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see how that comes up. I'm going to visit with the extension agent soon. You know, seed identification is a funny thing. A lot of those can look alike. So hopefully I will be able to devote some time to nurturing these seeds along next
I'm
year.
envisioning a garden called almost like your mother's wildflower garden. Wild, not being necessarily the wildflowers we see in the thing, but wild because we're wild and don't have a clue what we're planting. So it's
her yard used to be known. She used to be known as the butterfly lady, because this little 1/4 acre was just full of all kind of butterflies, and this was pre-Google. This was going to the library and looking up books and growing out the different specimens. So I've been able to reclaim a little bit of that.
That'll be fun to see. That'll be fun. I hope that everybody else is thinking ahead as well of what to plant and what to do. So what were the fails this year for you? I have my own fails, but what were the fails for you this year?
Drought.
Yeah, I was going to say drought really killed us. If we happened to go away, my son would be in charge of watering, and that didn't happen. But my entire vegetable garden just died, and it was part drought. But talking to another expert, we don't have enough bees around our area, so I'm going to actually plant a wildflower garden up on my front of my property and see if that helps. And I planted some butterfly bushes at their suggestion, and hopefully that'll help too. But we have deer, and deer eat everything.
Munchy.
Yeah.
That is the one thing about leaving the mountains.
Yes.
We have a fenced-in yard, so
that is true.
Not fighting the critters all the time.
So it's interesting to see. And if you guys are watching this after the fact, drop a comment on this particular episode and let us know what your success was and what your failure was, because that's how we learn. Let us know what area you're at. If you can either do it by your zone, that the agricultural zone that you have, or you could tell us what part of Appalachia or what state that you're in. If you're not in Appalachia, like we do have Irish friends that join us as well, tell us what country you're in. But Rosie and I are really curious because as we have fun with this show, but as you said, you research as well. And we are going to, I think, start looking at different areas. I'm fascinated by still New York and Pennsylvania. And I want to know a little bit more about that part of Appalachia. I know Southern Pennsylvania. So let us know what your success, what your failure is, where you're watching from, what you'd like to see, anything like that. Always drop us a comment on our YouTube. Okay, so you want to talk about the calendar for the month?
Yeah.
Let's see. So, now you've given us a little bit of different calendar, same calendar, but you've given us some really cool tips right here at our fingertips.
Well, that was Canva. You can thank Canva. It is my magic that I have. And I also had to pretty it up because I was eating fudge and looking at the calendar at the same time, and it got chocolate all the way across the front. So what you see is covering up the chocolate goop. But does anybody see what is happening in December that's unusual? There are a couple of things going on in December that don't happen very often. Sandy, look at the new moon. Tell me what might be happening with the new moon.
I'm looking. Yeah.
For one thing, it happens on the 1st.
Yeah, but what's going on the 7th?
On the 7th looks like it's the fishes, and that's the signs in the feet, which is a very fruitful day. The new moon, but in the new moon, if you look down on the 30th, this month we have 2 new moons.
And that has happened. Was it May? I want to say there was another time I think this year that happened, because I remember thinking, how cool was that we can bookend?
Yeah, and I don't remember if that happened or if it happened that there was maybe two waning periods, one at the beginning and
Yeah.
one at the end. And one of the best questions, I don't know who ever asked this, but thank you for asking, is like, well, wouldn't they be the same every month? Wouldn't these,
Yeah.
if the moon cycles through the signs 2.5 days in every sign in every month, couldn't we just know that if it was the first, there was a new moon? Oh my goodness, do I wish.
Yeah.
Because that was my number one problem when I first started learning this, is how to immediately detect those waxing periods and the waning periods. Because this calendar is busy, and this calendar never really says Pisces. You know, the way that we conceptually think about, I could give you a list of all the fruitful signs, but I might say the fruitful signs are Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. But this calendar's never going to say that. Instead, they're going to show you some feet. They're going to show you a couple of fishes. And then they're going to put a lot of other information on it. So I wish that every calendar started with the new moon on the first. It would sure make
Life
understanding this
yeah.
system easier. But you know, we have the lunar time, it takes the moon to get from one phase and back to that same phase is shorter than our month. And calendars have a long history. If you're interested in that, I've been researching a little bit about how our lunar solar calendars, which cultures use them and why. But this month is special because we have two new moons. Now, folklore language is one thing, and what astronomers call it is different. But what I've heard, two new moons in a month, is called a black moon. But well, that's just what I've heard. What have you heard?
Interesting, because Chris Warren brings up something with we're supposedly having, how much it is going to affect us. And that's interesting when you start mentioning black. I've always just heard of it as a double moon.
I've never heard double moon. I think that's great.
Yeah, I haven't heard black moon. So this is where I think part of Rosann and I love this part, because we both learn from each other as well. And we're still learning this as we go along. Like, who knew my garden was going to be a complete failure? But Rosann, you also had new symbols on this calendar, I think,
yeah,
right?
I did. I played with some of the symbols. I put the bulbs in. You can see that there's a bulb on the 16th.
Right there.
And then there's bulbs right around Christmas, I think.
Yep.
Maybe, yeah, on Scorpio. Yep. Or as we would say, some people call Scorpio, they would say the loins, which this calendar, I've also heard it called the secrets. I've also heard it called the privates. So if we go back to that zodiac man, the man of many signs, or sometimes it's called the anatomy. If you remember seeing that at the on some of our past shows, and I throw it up on my Instagram every once in a while. But essentially, it's a picture of a man, and then with all the signs coming out at the places of his body. So that is right out of a medieval medicine technique. So before a doctor would purge a patient or bleed a patient, the doctor would consult the signs to make sure that they weren't in an inappropriate place. And that's where even today we might hear, never go to the dentist when the signs are in the head, because you'll bleed like a stuck pig. A direct quote from an elder. Dentist, I've had dentist cancellations, and they'd say, well, the signs are in the head, so I don't guess you want to come either.
Oh, how interesting. So they know.
Or don't have surgery when the signs are in the heart, the killing sign of Leo. Now, if your doctor tells you to have surgery, have surgery.
Yeah, go have surgery. Please.
But the point is that what I love about Appalachian tradition is there's that remnant, there's that holdover of, instead of saying the signs are in Pisces, it is the signs are in the feet, or the signs are in the fishes. And sometimes the names, I don't understand in the first place, like Libra, which is the flower sign. It's called the rains. And I've heard some people pronounce the Rhines. And finally, I just asked, what is that? I was looking back on my zodiac, man. It's kidneys. It's kidneys, in the kidneys. So I've also heard a new term that is when the signs are going out of the body. By that, they mean if it starts with the head of the man and goes down to his feet, that means the signs are going down, as opposed to the new cycle, when in December, when we get to the 10th, that's the head. And so the signs start going up. So if we were on a farm and if we needed to know when we were going to castrate our pigs, we would look for the time when the sign is going down. Phil Case calls it beyond anything that counts. Think about that. And this man of sign, your head counts, your arms count, your heart surely counts.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to keep the rest of my reproductive system. That definitely counts. And then we get to thighs and knees and ankles and feet. And that's considered where it doesn't count. And that's when they would try to find that two things, the waning moon and the signs going down out of the body. And that's when I really began to appreciate how old this heritage is and how it's been adapted in language that worked for the group.
That's a very good point. That is an extremely good point that you mentioned, because we're not going to pretend that way back in time when these farmers were there that they were educated, at a university and things like that. The terms and the words sometimes had to match every education. And farmers work day, sun up to sundown. They weren't probably in college or university back. At least my ancestors were not. And I think that is a very important thing that you mentioned, that this terminology had to make sense and had to work for multiple different cultures and groups, because we've explored this year different cultures without even knowing that's where we were headed. We talked about sauerkraut, and that was coming from the Germans, for example. You talk about some of these bulbs, and some of these bulbs come from different parts of Europe that people are bringing over. So we are talking about different cultures. It's fascinating to me, Rosann, that they're coming together in Appalachia and they create this common farm planting language.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. It's a lot like our music. When if this instrument or this tradition came from this place in this time, and then it came together somehow as old time music, which I learned really fast when I accidentally called old time bluegrass.
Oh no!
Never the twain, never the twain shall meet. I was educated right fast on that, and so I began to think of the same things happened in storytelling. And storytelling, that people in my family who told stories, they would never thought of themselves as a storyteller. They just knew that after dinner they sat around and talked, or at the campfire they talked, on the porch they talked. But now in Jonesboro, Tennessee, with the National Storytelling Festival, national tellers are a thing. International tellers, it's a thing. So that's like how we went from old time music. This is the way we all play the same song together, and we play it over and over and over and over again. The joke is, when does an old time music song end? You mean it ends? To bluegrass, which is showmanship. And we have the same, our language our music, our tunes can change from valley to valley. If you ever get a chance to hear Dr. Esther Morgan Ellis, who is the Appalachian, she teaches history of Appalachian music, or Dr. 𝗪𝗶𝗴𝗴. They are both musicians, and they talk about this tune is in this valley, and how in another valley the tune might have gotten passed down a little bit different. And that's the same as the stories, this folk vernacular. Is it a double moon, or is it a black moon? Is it planted by the suns? Is it planted by the moon? It was probably all the same thing. You just called it something different because they were not in the academy. I hate that word. They were not in or of the academy. And so they didn't need to have a standardized term. You look up and see if the moon was waxing or waning.
And that's exactly what they did. And if they didn't, they had this calendar at their back door before they left in the morning to go to the farm.
Yes. And I really, when we were working on our seed project, I really saw things from a different place. We think we are the university, we are the place of learning, but to learn this knowledge does not exist in a university.
It doesn't.
It exists in the lives of the people, our neighbors. It existed with the men and women who cleaned the university, the ones who made the repairs, the ones who cut the grass, who were mostly local people, very, very unfairly paid, I might add, as compared to way up the chain. But that is where this knowledge resides. That our seed keepers, they were doing fine. They didn't need us.
Yeah,
we, the university, needed them. And I think that's so true. And even though a lot of our songs have been written down, a lot of our stories are now gone into books. There's something to be said about finding someone who can play this music, who can teach us this different way, this different language. A friend in Virginia, she piped her classroom into mine in one of the early Zoom days. And all of her students there, they just insisted it was not planting by the suns. Who'd ever heard of that? They'd always heard planting by the moon. That's what they called it. Same rules. You had the moon and you had the signs. Same rules, same calendar.
Just a different
moon phase. It was just called planting by the moon.
When you
it was not lunar gardening. I think that's a new name that's come up. But I think it's the best way to learn this is find a neighbor, find an elder. Go. Just talk to your neighbor and see what they know and see who they know.
Yeah. Watch what they're planning, when they're planning, and partner up.
Yeah. And just talk to them. We forget that it's just as simple as talking to someone.
Now, something I have not done in a very, very long time where I live is go to the local feed store. I used to be able to do that and buy the calendar and chit chat. If there's a drought, what do you think? What are you planning? What are you trying to harvest? Just chit chat. So I think that might be something I'm going to do in 2025. Is take your advice. Go to the local feed store where some of the old timers are, because even though I've been here well over 20 years, I'm still considered a transplant.
Certainly.
And they are not.
Will be.
yeah, and they are not. So that's something else to think of. Now, Rosann, you do have your 2025 calendar already?
I do. I have 3 of them.
Oh.
Because one is going to be my good one for this podcast. One is going to be the one that's mine that I can write on, because I actually go through and I mark out things. First thing I do is I find the killing sign. I don't care where it is. I put a big red X on it. The next thing I do is right after I find the new moon, and I start putting up eras until I find the full moon. And then I start putting down eras. And this was handy when we worked in a 14-room house with lots of students and community coming in and out. And some of the students hadn't been in the program as long. So they understood the rules, but this calendar can be so confusing. They just needed, so I hope that when you get your calendar, some are free, some are not, but when you get it, mark it up. We do have an Ember Day this month.
Days before this broadcast. We started in January, right? With Ember Days?
Well, Ember Days come 4 times a year. 4 times a year, and they're not sequential days. Like they're not like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They're on a Wednesday and they skip. And I think, what are they? The Thursday. Let me have a look here. So they're on Wednesday, skips Thursday, and then Friday and Saturday. And that's actually the solstice or winter begins. A traditional calendar wouldn't use the word solstice. They would have said winter begins. So that is one of those days that you definitely don't want to plant on. And that 18th, that 18th, I mean,
it's trouble.
Cut wood if you want to. But the old saying is, don't ever cut a tree when the signs are in the heart unless you want to kill it. So it's not a good time to do any kind of transplanting or grafting or anything like that. It's also a good day for cooking. Any of the fiery signs, the heart, the head, the thighs are good cooking and wood cutting days. But this 18th, it is literally, I should have put double X through that. Because, not only is it Ember Day, which, don't plant on an Ember Day. And it's also the signs are in the heart. So, which is that fiery, the killing is the Leo or the heart is the most killing sign, the very, very worst. If you were a teacher, you'd say that student's going to fail no matter what I do.
On that day, don't have a test on that day either.
He's the F student, the Cancer, the crab, or the breast. That is your number one A student who's going to make an A no matter what you do. So if you can think of those two things are the total opposites. There are some days, in case you're lucky enough to have a greenhouse and you're still planting, or maybe you're going to plant some microgreens. I had wanted to experiment with that this year. I do have huge lights, two, big lights of my mom's that hang with shelves to put different things on, and the lights, you can move the lights down to right above the plants. So if you're lucky enough to have that, then here are the days where the vegetables above ground, meaning the part that you eat or the most valuable part, is what is above ground. All vegetables, all plants have above ground parts and below ground parts. But we're talking about what is the part that you eat. So if I was planning on some microgreens, I'm going to clip that top part. So those would be my above ground veggie days.
Now, is this also starting from seed at this point too? Are we doing it, or are we waiting?
I try some microgreens with seed because in this one little part, the way my mother had it set up, it's set up to have extra light and extra warmth. And that's what seeds like. And microgreens are quick growing, and I've never experimented with that. I have paid $5 for a wee little tiny package at the farmer market of microgreens. So, hopefully I can learn this. My students always wanted to do that. They are the hip thing. But we just always had our hands full with first having the seed demonstration garden. And then during the pandemic, we changed actually producing food for people. But those indoor bulbs, again, it's probably too late to plant any bulbs outside. But there are some good days, especially right after Christmas, because the moon is waning. Maybe you'll have gotten those Christmas bulbs and some good days to get them in the ground. Construction isn't something that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
I hardly ever find references to construction. Some of the material that comes out of Andalusia, Alabama, a little tiny little pamphlet we discovered in the Foxfire archives. That was what the people from North Georgia were using, those elders who were interviewed more than 50 years ago. And they were already 70s, 80s, 90s. So this little pamphlet would talk about Capricorn, or the knees, as being really good for construction. Also really good for foundations. Now, again, temperature, you got to act like you got some sense about you. You're not going to go out and and pour some foundation when it's too cold. I was also reading Phil Case's Facebook. He writes a nice essay at the beginning of every month. And I'm not paid to say this, but I really enjoy the way he goes into, in his tradition, he's out of Kentucky, he'll talk about when are the times to put down gravel. Because that is something that he learned from his older friends. The time to weed and clear or to destroy. I love this calendar. It says destroy noxious growths. Those things you don't know what is that, but it's looking scary. So those are the same days, that 17th, 18th, 19th. Those are the days that you really can't do anything else. But if you've got some land that needs to be cleared, and you don't have any hogs you can turn out on it, because hogs will do it. Let me tell you. So will be two big dogs. I've got two big dogs. I've got a hog waller in part of that yard. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is something that I don't think we've talked about much, is when do we make changes?
What is that?
Well, we might want to have a whole separate thing on that, but it's back to that zodiac man, or man of many signs, that iconic figure that's at the beginning of every almanac and on the back of every calendar. And it's that technique of you look for a waning moon. A moon is appearing to get smaller, and you look for when the signs are going out of the body. If you're going to lose weight, if you want to quit smoking, this is also the time that you would cut your animals. Those are the times that they say it is the best time to make changes. So it's going to be a weird thing. I hope we can do something with that in January, because according to my calendar, you don't have to start your resolutions on January 1st because it ain't time yet. So you might even be able to want to wait till March. So what you're wean a baby or wean a cow, wean a calf. I've seen that a lot in the old, in some of the older materials. Farmers weren't so concerned with how can I lose weight or quit smoking. They were like, how do I do what I need to do to survive?
Yes.
So making a change is kind of code for anything that you need to do to your animals. And there's a lot of discussion around when to kill your hogs, on the waxing or waning, what it does to the meat. And I'm still learning that. I need to find somebody who, I had one student whose grandfather still did that, and she would invite me to a hog kill, and it's like, oh, I just can't.
Yeah.
I'm a hypocrite. I want my pork wrapped.
Yeah. And from the store. Well, I'm wondering too. So it's interesting because some of the areas in more, I would say, central Appalachia grew tobacco, and they would have to switch their crop because tobacco is very hard on land, very, very hard. So then they started switching to soybeans because soybeans would bring the nutrients back to land. So do you think that this is something that they would do on change days, that they would try to maybe switch their crops even?
I'm going to check. I've been keeping another spreadsheet. I'm pretty possessed by spreadsheets. If there's a young person out there who knows how to turn this into the app, I'll give you the stuff to do it. And I saw something about tobacco. I like to go back and read old almanacs, which surprisingly, there's not a lot written in almanacs. And what that tells you right there is this was a tradition that was known. This was
Mm-hmm.
not a print tradition. We had the code, but we didn't have many instructions. But where I'm finding things or looking back in Frank Brown's, he had a multi-volume, I think 7 volumes that he collected early in the 1900s. I think he was all done, maybe even dead by 1940. I'll have to look this up, but he has a whole series of collections. And I saw there's a lot in there about waxing and waning. I saw something about tobacco, and I'll look that up.
I'm
So,
curious because I can see different crops, or maybe, hey, corn didn't work well on this side. We're going to move it to that side. And I can also see changes in their own home that they might be making as well. I think
yeah.
this changing, planting by the signs make changes is a fascinating thing. I'm going to have to research this too because I'm curious about the changes that maybe the farmers or even my own ancestors made. I find it interesting because you also talk about this is passed down. And this is one of the things that I've always seen this calendar, but I never talked in great detail with my ancestors about how they
Yes.
use this calendar. I live in a subdivision, so obviously my use of the calendar is quite different than theirs. But I
Yes.
still follow the same signs.
Yeah, and I tell you, that's probably one of my biggest regrets. Even though I was close to my grandparents, I lived with them, my paternal set, until I was 4. Not because my parents weren't there; they were there. They were just all right there on the farm together there. So, and that always hung. That calendar always hung.
Yeah.
And it used to be not written. There was nothing printed on the backside. There were little blocks for every day. And so my grandfather would use that to record how much he sold, what the yield was, what the rain was. But now they're saving paper, so that's not the blank sheet. But my grandfather did not plant by the signs. He said he didn't live on the moon, he lived on the earth. He wasn't going to plant by it. He wanted to be he wanted to talk to his extension agent. He wanted to be the latest. He wanted to go to college and never could. So he
Yeah.
was very, very interested in science. But that calendar still hung on the wall. I wish I had asked.
Yeah. And
Yeah, about
these
those
are the things that when somebody comes into the house after somebody's passed, it's in the trash. And I would love to see some of these. Every town I visit, I look for an antique place, an antique mall or something, because I'm always fascinated in musical instruments and papers. What type of
Yes.
papers, whether it's postcards, whether it's almanacs. I have yet, and this is many, many years. You can ask my husband. He's now a fan of antique stores. We have yet to find a calendar. Used
Yeah.
calendar. And if
They
I
were
do, I'll be happy day.
they were second only to the Bible, these calendars and
And
almanacs.
they didn't
They
survive. And you're
yeah.
right. That is a very good point.
Of all the elders
No.
that worked with us, I knew one elder, and he himself didn't save it, but his mother had saved them because
Mm.
she recorded rainfall.
Oh.
And she wanted to be, and she could, but I met her before she passed. She wore out sewing machines selling things at the farmers market after she
Mhm.
said, I'm too old to garden, but I can still
I can still
sew.
sew.
And she was very interested. She didn't say climate change. She would say how things are changing,
Mm.
and how she was a child that snowed often in North Georgia, and we might have a small snow a year, maybe. So she was very interested. Miss Reba was her name.
Oh.
She was very interested in tracking that. The I did go to the rare book section at the Library of Congress a few years ago when the students and I were in Washington, which was a whole experience. You can't even, they furnish the paper and pen, everything else goes in the locker. And I looked at these old almanacs. Your mom saved it. Good,
I
Chris.
know.
Good.
Wow.
That is fabulous. That is rare. And they bring it out in this thing that
Yeah.
hold books, and you have to use the paddle to turn the page, and the
Mhm.
librarian sits next to you.
No
So
ripping out of pages.
they do exist, and I'm beginning to see more and more online digital exhibitions of
Mhm.
some of the old almanacs and calendars. But Yeah, and unfortunately, seeds go the same way. You know, if I didn't know what, in fact, when I was going through the shed and I was just grabbing things that were dried up or nasty and throwing away, and I said, "What in the world? It's another thing." And I said, "No, I'm going to open this one." And that's when I started finding the seeds, and that's what I realized. That's where my mother kept her seed collection. A lot of people keep their seeds in the freezer in a Tums bottle or
Mhm.
whatever they've got. Those go. That's how we're losing our seeds. The elders go, and then the seeds or
And
the
then we lose.
calendars go.
That's a good
Yeah.
point too. And that's why I hope that everybody enjoyed this year as we went through, and we kind of went through and showed how to use the calendar every month, and we're still going to do this next year. We're going to add a couple of things, but Rosann's calendar is the hallmark of the show, and I really appreciate you not only adding the icons and also the crossing out, so we know the signs. But what you've added this time is the list of what to do and the dates. And I'm going to make her promise to do it all
I'll
next year
promise to
too.
do that. You just blame the fudge.
Yes.
Yeah, blame the fudge. That's
Yes.
how this one happened. But
I truly love that. And then as we wrap up, well, I want to mention too that a lot of times we talk about December and Christmas trees. We were going to talk a little bit more detailed about it last time, but as you know, that last time we had a special guest on talking about the floods in the Carolinas and East Tennessee from Helene. So if I wanted to go cut wood, my next best chance would be the 17th and 19th for a Christmas tree. If I was going to,
yeah, I mean, you pretty much, you're going to kill your Christmas tree anyway.
yeah.
So if you go and cut one, but some people would also say that the signs are in the head on the 9th and the 10th. They
Mm-hmm.
might say that's the waning moon, but because those fiery signs, the Foxfire elders said there are two killing signs. One was the head, one was the heart. A couple of exceptions there, but in general. So the 9th and the 10th, if you want to go ahead and get your Christmas tree up, that would be okay too.
That would be good.
Those are also in the waning moon. Those are harvesting dates. If you see a fiery sign or a barren sign, which is air, airy signs, those are the times that you want to harvest. The idea is that they will keep longer. And I've had such poor experiences with keeping carrots. One time somebody showed me how to make this nice bed of sand and keeping sweet potatoes, and you layered the carrots and you layered the beautiful sand, and we had a fabulous time doing it. And we opened that thing much later, and I'm telling you what, it was about like changing a cat litter box.
Oh
Those
no.
carrots were
Or
little
not.
tiny shriveled up black things. So if anybody else on here knows about winter storage of bulbs or bulb-like root crops, I would love to learn that. The times of having our
reach out
storm
to
cellars. And my grandparents always did
Yeah.
sweet potatoes and white sand. But they were doing something I wasn't doing.
And I'll say, before we wrap up, Chris, thank you for being here. And as many of you might know too, that Chris is very active in her state fair. So maybe we'll get Chris to tell us a little tips about going to the state fair next year as well. But the calendar, you can get them at feed stores. Usually, if you have local feed stores, you can also buy them directly on. I think, Rosann, you buy yours directly
Yes.
from the
That calendar
American
company.
Calendar
Mhm.
Company that's in Greenville, Tennessee.
That's my favorite because that's what I learned on.
And I know that they are available on that really, really, really big. We get no kickback, so I guess I might as well name them from Amazon as well. Amazon has the ones that I kind of grew up on, the Ramon ones,
Yeah.
and they have different versions. They're about $10 or $15 if you happen to be involved in genealogy in Appalachia, that you know that I also am on wiki tree for the Appalachia project. And I can tell you that we have a meetup this month where the door prizes will be calendars.
Excellent, excellent. Chris, I also want to tell you that be careful with Amazon. I'm still addicted to it, even though I shouldn't be. I cut myself off from Prime, and then I cut myself back into it when I can't stand it anymore. A couple of years ago, I wanted my calendar fast, and I thought that the Greenville, Tennessee might take too long, so I ordered it from Amazon. Well, they sent me the year before. They didn't send me the one coming up. So about August is when the new calendars come out for the next year, and I learned the hard way. I'd have to say that this little company out of Greenville, Tennessee, it got there fast. It got there absolutely. I was like, what? They're already here.
And I'm a fan. Yeah, I think we're a fan of supporting the small businesses and the independent businesses, and that would be definitely where I go. This particular calendar page, and we do this every time, is linked down below in the description. So if you forget who the company is by any reason, just come to this YouTube and click on the link on the calendar page that Rosann's done, and you'll see, because she thankfully has put the American calendar out of Greenville, Tennessee, not South Carolina.
Yes. They have an interesting site. They sell a lot of different calendars, and where they really, my idea is that they make their money is at the top of the calendar. There's a blank space.
Yeah.
Mine just has lines in it because it doesn't come from a company. But let's say a feed and seed store might order hundreds of these with their imprint at the top. It's used for advertising. I have found these as in many places, as of course the feed and seed, but also funeral homes, or also drugstores. If you have old-timey drugstore, especially one that still has, that little seating counter, you go in and get a milkshake or a hamburger. It's the old-timey mom and pops, and unfortunately, those are going too. I think one of the last ones in 𝗪𝗶, North Carolina, just went. But it's easier for me now, just to get mine directly out of Greenville.
I was going to say insurance agents usually have them. But again, I'm going to take Rosann's lead. It's kind of more the independent ones instead of going into a big store insurance agent type guy. Funeral homes always seem to have them. And this was mostly Appalachia. This is, I can't speak for around the world. So definitely just pop in, and usually they're right at the front door.
Yeah, and it's probably free if it's their
and they usually have some mints or candy right there too, so grab one on your way out. So I just want to thank Rosann for joining this venture this year. This was something that I wanted to learn, and I appreciate you teaching me as well as everybody else and bringing this to Appalachia, fans of Appalachia. Thank you also to everybody who watched. And if you have watched the last 2 episodes, you know that we did support the Appalachians that were affected by Helene. Down in the credits are organizations that are working for coats, because it is very cold in Appalachia right now. We don't really promote any organization because we would have to personally vet those, and we're not in a position to personally vet those. But a coat is going through local churches, and people can go and pick up there, and local churches and some places where people pick up food, because this is still a need in Appalachia. But I also want to say that Rosann and I will be back in January, and we've got some exciting ideas that we're going to do next year. If you guys have any ideas that you'd like to see or see us do, we're kind of silly. We might do it.
And please let us know. If you were in my class, I would have said, okay, before you leave, you have to give me an exit pass. And that's just a 3x5 card with what did you enjoy learning about the most, and what didn't you learn that you wanted to learn. And of course, they'd write something down like making jelly It's
Oh,
this
yeah.
university, I probably can't get away with teaching that.
Yeah.
But it was a good idea. It gave me feedback about what their expectations were. So please let us know that. And I think, Sandy, we're going to switch to Tuesdays, to the first Tuesday of a month, to keep the time consistent. First of the month would be lovely. But I think it's easier and stays more consistent if we just
I think you're right.
Tuesday.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then I guess the only thing to leave off with is make sure you get your calendar, because we're going to start that first Tuesday, and we're going to have big plans this year. We're going to do gardens. Rosann has cleaned out the area, and in gardens, we're going to have gardens of all different types. And if you have any photos, send them. Reach out,
Chris. I would love to hear more about your county fairs. That is a tradition that's quickly going, and one that was huge. That's so much a part of Appalachia,
and we can't let that. We can't have that happen. So
yeah,
we'll make her.
You'll be our consultant.
She could be a roving reporter during her state fair and show us all the good stuff, all the jams.
Yeah.
Well, have a nice holiday, everybody. And Rosann, thanks so much for being a friend. I really have enjoyed doing this with you.
I've loved it too. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.